Systems engaged. Frequencies synchronized. Prepare for incoming transmission. Coming to you from somewhere in the multiverse, this is Robots from Tomorrow. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and as always your podcatcher of choice. For the full archive featuring over 800 episodes of comics and comics-friendly content like interviews, book discussions, and freeform tomfoolery, please go to robotsfromtomorrow.net. Here is your host, Greg.
Hello everybody, either welcome to the show or welcome back to the show, whichever the case may be. This is, as it no doubt says on your screen, Robots from Tomorrow. My name is Greg. Thank you for joining me. As I'm sure it also says on that very same screen, this is the second part of our three-part look at the best Batman stories of the Bronze Age. You can find the first part a little ways back in our episode feed, or I'll include the link in the show notes. Of course, returning with this topic is our Bronze Age designated driver himself, the DC3 cast's very own Vince Ostrowski. We cover a lot in this episode. From Archie Goodwin's tenure as writer-editor on Detective Comics, to Steve Englehart and Marshall Rogers' Dark Detective run, from the artistic evolution of Walt Simonson over various inkers, to just how long is too long for Bat-Ears. From just what happens when Bruces collide in an intercompany crossover, to just how hard it is to say Dick Giordano correctly. All that and much more is just seconds away. But first, of course, if you end up enjoying what you hear today, you can let us know in the usual places where you like, subscribe, rate, and review Robots from Tomorrow, as well as our Blue Sky account, and of course, the RFT mothership over at robotsfromtomorrow.net. Stick around till the end and find out what we've got coming up over the next month or so. Or, skip that and just be surprised when a new episode drops into your podcatching device or venue of choice. No judgment, either way works. But for now, let's dive into this chat, taking another look at a chunk of the best Batman stories of the Bronze Age. Hello everybody, I'm Dr. Nick Riviera. No, that's not right. I'm Greg, and you're listening to Robots from Tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. Today, we are diving back into our shelf-bound series with the second volume of the greatest Bronze Age Batman stories. With me to make sense of things is, as always, the DC3 cast's very own Vince Ostrowski, color commentator to my play-by-play announcing. Vince,
Hey,
how you doing?
Great. That was a great intro. I love
That's... I don't know about great, but I mean, you do over 800 of these things. You got to mix it up a little bit. You got to make it fresh for yourself. So it's been a minute since you've been on the show and since we've docked Batman. So we're going to rectify that today with...
Now, Batman's the one whose parents died in the alley, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Not on the planet in a different galaxy or whatever.
Okay.
This is the alley. Not strange and mysterious. Fuck. Criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. That's
yes.
right.
I got my frame of mind then. Perfect.
Okay, good. You're set. Because we did do the greatest Superman stories. No, greatest Bronze Age Superman stories. 3 volumes of that. So you got your Bronze Age hat on, but you got to get into the right mindset here.
Absolutely.
Basically, sort of chronological order. We have Detective Comics 437 to 443, 457 by itself, 469 to 479, minus 477. There's a whole bunch of numbers. We'll explain this when we go through it. DC Superstars 17, DC Special Series 15, Detective Comics, but it's kind of called Batman Family on the cover, 482, Adventure Comics 461 to 463, an actual issue of Batman, 321, The Untold Legend of Batman 1 through 3, Detective Comics 500, and DC Special Series 27, or as it's known, Batman versus the Incredible Hulk. You read these comics. What did you think?
Oh, I love this stuff. I mean, I really do. I mean, anytime you're talking about Jim Aparo, Walt Simonson, those are some of my favorites, period. And yeah, I was actually surprised at how much I liked some of the work from artists that, not that I necessarily didn't ever like, but just never really seek out in particular. And we can talk about those as we come across them. But the thing about the Bronze Age, my one criticism of it would be at times it's a little light on your classic villains, right? On the other hand, that can be really refreshing, and it makes the tone of these comics different than some of the other classic eras that you think of when you think of Batman. So like there's plenty of the Joker and there's a splash of the Penguin in here and maybe one or two others, but a lot of this is stories that don't necessarily feature the Rogues Gallery, and it just makes the books feel really different and dark and weird in a grim way sometimes, but also just in like a horror tinged or supernatural way that doesn't quite line up with, let's say, like the Batman animated series Rogues Gallery, you know, different weirdos coming in and out of Batman's life, you know? And so this group of issues really was a lot of different interesting predicaments for Bruce to be in that he's not normally in. I feel like the tone across Archie Goodwin's editorial hand is really consistent and dark and grim, but doesn't forget to have, I don't know if I want to say fun. It's not like goofy, you know, but it's swashbuckling. It's not mired in grim and grittiness yet, you know? Actually, a better way to say it would be that there's a pretty short bridge from the swashbuckling international super spy Denny O'Neil version of the character to this one. You know, it's not much of a leap. And while there are things that are different about it, the tone still kind of matches that one. You know, there's a through line there for sure.
And Goodwin gets to do his own espionage, world traveling stuff with the Manhunter stuff.
Oh man.
Right? Yeah. Spoiler alert, which isn't really a spoiler if anybody's listened to any of my episodes. I'm a huge Archie Goodwin fan. Archie is on display in this chunk of issues. And I actually originally had blocked the Goodwin chunk at the end of the last book that we did talk about. And I moved it to this chunk. And I'm really glad I did, because it starts this book off really, really well. There is the Manhunter, the Simonson backup. One of the threads in these issues in this volume is not only his evolution as an artist, but also seeing an artist inked by different people. The first chunk is, what's it, Walt, like we're buddies, is Simonson inking himself. And then later on, he's inked by Al Milgrom, which gives you a really different look. And then a little later on in Batman 321, he's inked by Dick Giordano. Ugh. And you get a completely different look there. Also, Dick Giordano is like all over these issues as both an inker and as the full artist himself. So these issues really do give us a good spotlight artistically on a bunch of people that are at, I guess everybody who's at DC, because we don't really see any Marvel artists here. But speaking of DC artists, Jim Aparo. He is a beast in these issues, and I love me some Neil Adams, I really do, but when Aparo is on, that is really my definitive Batman. You know, now he was only able to do the first 2 issues of this detective run. We'll see him for the Untold Legends of Batman, but scheduling conflicts prevented him from really being able to do all of the Archie interior stories. But when it says, you know, Archie Goodwin, writer, editor, Jim Aparo, artist, I forgot to check if he's doing colors, but he's certainly...
he is.
Oh, he is? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he is literally doing everything visual you see, because he's doing the pencils, he's doing the inks, he's doing the colors, and he's doing the lettering. So soup the nuts. This is a Jim Aparo presentations of Archie Goodwin stories, and damn, oh, it's good stuff. 437 to 443, these are, I think, 100-page issues. So they have a Batman main story, Manhunter backup, and a bunch of reprints or shorter stories in between. I didn't make Vince read the in-between stories. Each one of these main stories is written by Archie Goodwin. The first 2 drawn by Jim Aparo, and we have some Alex Toth in there. We have Howard Chaykin. We do have one that's not written by Archie Goodwin, kind of based on a Neil Adams idea that is drawn by Sal Almendola, Night of the Stalker, which is really good. But you've got Archie doing these stories in the front of the book. And his background before this, he was at Warren Comics, or Warren Publishing, I should say, essentially sort of the staff writer for magazines like Creepy and Eerie. His Blazing Combat is amazing. Like, all of his stuff is good, but he cut his teeth on being able to bang out stories with different artists. So he will tailor to showcase each individual artist. And I think we also get to see that here as well. The first issue, 437, was actually included in the Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told, which was a book that I got when I was 10 as a door prize at a comic show that I went to. And I had known about Batman, but I wasn't really like a DC kid at the time. I was very much Marvel. But I got this block of Batman sort of gifted to me. And I'm like, all right, let me look at this. So I'm sure I mentioned this last time. The comics that were in that book really are the scaffolding of the comics that I picked for this series. 437, this Death Mask story was in there. We're not going to go necessarily issue by issue, but I feel like at least these first two really do deserve an extra look at. What did you... I'm assuming you enjoyed them?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Definitely. I love this Death Mask issue. I mean, Archie Goodwin announces the beginning of his writer/editorial run here with that cover. First of all, just the way that it looks and the redesign of going back to the old logo. You know, you had talked about how he came from the creepy wing of things. You can absolutely tell that. Like, for the most part, these are all stories that would be right out of like creepy comics or something, but they just happen to have Batman in them. You know, kind of what I was referencing earlier with the fact that, especially in like the first half of our reading here, there's very little, if at all, to do with the classic Batman rogues. And it's because he's getting put in these creepy one-off situations that nonetheless fit like a Batman milieu. Like this thing about this God of Death mask that's being held in an exhibition at the Gotham Museum, and the, you know, crooks that are trying to sneak around and do whatever, and somebody gets killed and Batman has to hunt down the killer and all that. And it's totally a Batman story, you know, but it's just got this different creepy comics sort of one-off feel to it. And the fact that it ends with, actually, I noticed that several issues in this volume of our reading feature one of the villains dying, but not necessarily at Batman's hand directly, you know, which is that's a point of contention on the podcast that I normally co-host, where you know, I defend Batman as someone who has absolutely never killed anyone, and Brian and Zach like to think that they're correcting me, you know, but he always gets off on a technicality, you know. So
hey man, he yelled at that guy really clearly not to jump. It's not Batman's fault that the guy jumped, you know?
Exactly. See, right, exactly. But it is a just an interesting way for this first issue to end with the criminal getting crushed by this giant mask replica at the museum. Yeah. It's unusual for a Batman story, and yet not unfitting. And yeah, so it's just the issues that Goodwin was, because he only did this for a year, right? Like his editorial run.
Right. It was about a year. I think this was bi-monthly. It wasn't a monthly book. And then he went from here, I think, back to Warren and then to Marvel. So yeah. So it was about a year.
Yeah. And so my impression of that year is just like, all these stories are just so weird in this like tantalizing way, you know? And it helps that he's got like a murderer's row of artists working with him. But you talked about how Jim Aparo is your like preeminent Batman artist. I mean, I think he's my favorite too. If I had to pick one, I think I would say him. And I think it's because he can do like the dark, grim Batman. And boy, the first two issues of this, that is so on display, especially with him inking and coloring and doing his own lettering. It's really an artistic feat of tone and consistency. And it's a very dark, shadowy Batman kind of lurking through the museum. But then the other reason I love him, and this, we're not going to talk about this in this episode, but like where I'm used to reading or seeing his art most is in like Batman and the Outsiders or some of that era, where it's a lot more colorful, and he's still kind of the grumpy Batman, but he's got to play with a team, and he's got to, you know, there is more stuff bouncing off of more colorful characters, and there's more Robin stuff around that era. And so like he does anything Batman so well. Anytime he's drawing the costume, it just looks right to me. I'm big on like the Batman ears got to look right. If you draw the ears a certain way that's off-putting to me, then I'm like, you're not a bad artist, you know? You might not be a bad artist, but you're not a
Yeah.
bad artist, you know?
Nice.
Um,
So is there a particular length of ear that is your sweet spot,
well,
or
I don't like the short. It's right in the middle. It's just right.
oh, okay.
It's which one? Mama Bear? Was Mama Bear just right, or was Papa Bear just right? Whichever one it was.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I don't like the short and stubby, so I don't really care for anything that's homaging The Dark Knight Returns or anything like that.
Fair enough.
And I don't love when they get so exaggeratedly long, like
Mhm. Go ahead. Kill me. Go ahead, say it.
I'm sorry, Kelly
That's
Jones.
fine. No. No, it's okay. It's okay.
I mean, hey, here's the thing.
Yeah.
My relationship with Kelly Jones's work is complicated because
Mhm.
I've become known as the Kelly Jones hater,
Yeah.
but that's only true of his most recent work.
Hmm.
I like his work from back in the day, but it gets a little weird and exaggerated for me,
Hmm.
especially in modern times. I know I've said this a million times on my show, but the ears,
Hmm.
they got to be somewhere in the middle. You know, Kelly
Yeah.
Jones does ears that are a little too long, and so you
Yeah.
know, something about Aparos, they're thinnish and spiky, but they go high enough to be like they just look right to me. I don't know how
Yeah.
else to describe it. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
They're the measuring stick that the other ears are
exactly.
sort of measured against. You're like, oh, it's short. Well, it's short compared to the Aparo, or they're super long. Well, compared to the Aparo. Aparo is
That's
the
exactly
measuring
it.
stick that you use that all other bat men have to measure up to. Speaking of Aparo's work, this is a couple years afterwards, but looking at these pages for this Death Mask thing, this really reminds me of his Adventure Comics Spectre stuff
Mm.
with Michael Fleischer is just, I almost said batshit crazy. I mean, it is, but I didn't necessarily want to make the pun, but in explaining it, I made the pun anyway. But the whole having the villain crushed under the replica of the mask that he was like that last page, that could absolutely be a Jim Aparo Spectre page, even if Batman is in it. Any other Goodwin lead stories you want to talk about?
You already mentioned Night of the Stalker. That's
Hmm.
very good. There's a few issues in this volume that return to the murder of Bruce's parents and use that as kind of like either a bookend or some kind of thematic element
Without focusing on pearls. Now that I
without
think about it,
yes.
right?
Yes. Now I mean you would know because you're more of a historian than I am, but when did the pearls weren't there from the start, were they?
No, I mean, she was okay. So I'm winging this. She was obviously
Sorry.
shown to be wearing. No. It's cool. She was shown to be wearing pearls. Obviously, she's a woman of wealth. The pearl fixation, I think, comes from Dark Knight Returns,
I
where
think that's
Miller
right.
Miller did credit such a good job of breaking down the incident of Bruce's parents being killed, the way that time slows down in moments of crisis, and the fragmentation of what you're paying attention to and what he would remember. I'm going from my brain here, but 16 panel page, and it intercuts between the muzzle flash of the gun, the casing ejecting, versus the string of pearls going from a string and breaking, and the pearls going down from that. It is super effective in that it's imprinted on everybody's brain or a certain slice of creator's brain. And so now we have to relive it every time.
Yeah.
We can't sort of we in fact have become Bruce and that we are traumatized by this, by this
Well, and
event.
and what I would say about that is this time in comics, it was probably still pretty novel. You know, I think
Hmm.
like again, I'm a young lad. Well, getting older every day,
You're a
but
young lad. Let's just,
so I'm not a super Batman historian. But as I
mm,
recall from reading, like I've read plenty of detective comics in my life, you would return to Bruce Wayne's origin in the same way that you would return to like Superman's origin, in that some writer and artist would just decide to retell it every 50 to 100 issues because comics were disposable back then and like people didn't think that they were necessarily going to be saved and collected. And so every once in a while, they would just do the origins again, right? Like,
mhm.
I think Superman's origin for sure has been told like 6 or 7 different times before you get to the post crisis stuff. And every time they add like a little wrinkle or two, but you know, nonetheless, it's pretty much the same origin. And that's what happens to Batman 2, I think, maybe to a lesser degree. But like
Mhm.
in the Bronze Age, this is where you really start to feel it being used for like pathos and like advanced storytelling techniques, metaphor and illusions and comparing. I mean, we'll talk about an issue later where Leslie Tompkins comes in and something that happens to her recalls back to this. And it was probably fairly novel at this time. And
Mhm.
so, you know, maybe seeing it revisited isn't so tiresome as it maybe is in the year 2025, right? But the one thing I wanted to point out about Night of the Stalker is my favorite sequence, which is
Mhm.
when Batman's like tussling with the bad guys and he ends up in the river and they think that they've defeated him because he's gone underwater for a little while and he's not,
Mhm.
there's no sign of him coming up. And then he grabs the guy and pulls him into the river and you see it from the underwater perspective of Bruce just like pulling this guy face to face with him under the water.
Mhm.
So cool.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
scene is so awesome.
it's a real standout. And that was scripted by Steve Englehart, plot and pencils by Vin and Sal Amendola, inked by Dick Giordano. God damn, I just want to get through the episode and be able to
It's
say that at
hard.
least one thing.
It's
And of
tough.
course, edited by Archie Goodwin from an incident described by Neil Adams. I think the Neil Adams thing may have been just like he wanted to see Batman underwater,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever. Not like Neil Adams had a run in with Batman and he's like, oh, that could make a good story. And, you know, but not that happened. Interesting little note for this issue inspired Darwin Cook to do Deja Vu, a small Batman thing in solo number 5.
Oh yeah.
That story, which I think is all silence, it's the robbers after the bank robbery, they go into the woods and Batman stalks them and does all of that. And it's really good because I mean it's good. And then also, you know, Darwin Cook. You go back to this and you're like, okay, like it's not going to be Darwin Cook and it's not Neil Adams. So like, you know, I'm sure it'll be fine. And you read it and you're like, wow, that was really good. Steve Englehart, somebody who knows Batman pretty well, as we will see quite shortly. Yeah, some other stories. Obviously, the Alex Toth issue was also included in the Batman collection, which I think may have been some of the first Toth I'd ever seen.
Oh,
Right?
I
So that,
love Toth's art too.
oh, yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Uh,
I love the way that he draws. There's a lot of fire in this issue, and
mhm,
he draws fire in the same way that it was drawn in like the golden age of comics.
mhm.
And it looks so weird and it pops off the page. Those sequences are really eye-catching.
Yeah, I'm flipping through the story now. Apologies to people listening who aren't able to do the same. Uh, so I guess I can go ahead and ask this now. One of the things I think is indicative, certainly of the Goodwin stuff, both the main story and Manhunter, is using every single part of every limited page that they have. Being able to do so much with so little grew out of necessity, but I think Goodwin certainly and the artists he worked with were able to do so much with so little. And I think that is a hallmark of this material, but it's also something that is maybe more prevalent in this era of comics because a lot of these were one and done and they were just like, look, we only got less than the usual sort of amount of pages to have to tell these stories. So the pages tended to be very packed with dialogue, with information, plot information, but then the best artists are able to, and we'll certainly see this with Simonson Manhunter stuff, but even some of these others, like Toth is a really big advocate of this as well. The anti-splash pages, right? Being able to construct the page in such a way to tell so much information in that page because you only have essentially 8 pages or however many pages to be able to do that. Did that, and as I'm flipping through this, even the second page of the first story, the 437, the Detective Comics, is silent, right? So you
Mhm.
essentially have not even a splash page, but all the other pages are chock-a-block with word balloons and notes and all of that stuff. But it's so surprising to have a page with no actual dialogue on it.
Yeah.
And even that understanding of form and the use of form and being able to have so much on a page. And yet, at least for me, I didn't really get a feeling of, man, will these guys shut up? I need to just look at the Aparo, like stop covering the Aparo art. But it feels like every part of the comics Buffalo was used to make these stories in a way that makes them better than just like what happens. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally. And
Okay.
and tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but to make the comparison to like creepy comics, when I say creepy comics, I know that specifically means like a thing that Archie Goodwin worked on, but I don't necessarily mean, I mean that type of story. So I could be talking about like EC comics or some of those older like horror comics
From
from
the
like
50s.
yeah, like the generation before.
Mm.
I've read some of that stuff. Some of it I enjoy, but I can't get into too much of it, or I can't read too much of it in one sitting
Mhm.
because I do think they tend to get overly wordy, right?
Mhm.
And this is where you can tell me if I'm talking out of my ass.
Mhm.
But part of it to me is the brilliance of taking Batman slash Bruce Wayne
Mhm.
and dropping him into a story like that. Now the reader brings context. They know who Batman is. So
Mhm.
Batman's put into this scenario. The scenario still plays out as a full story, but you don't have to do much time establishing the main protagonist. You only have to establish the other side of it.
Mhm.
And to me, that when I'm reading it, that's where I see the real economy happening, you know?
Mhm.
For example, the Ghost Mountain Midnight story, where
Mhm.
this woman gets abducted from this club in the city and taken to this small little mountain village, and Bruce is like tracking her. Again, we all know who Batman is. We know what he's going to do or what his mindset is. So now you only have to establish who these hillbillies are and who this
Mhm.
woman is and the stakes there, you know? And so I just think that it's two
Mhm.
great tastes that taste great together, right? And it ends up helping create that economy, at least in part.
Mhm. I think there's a lot to that. I think what makes Goodwin so good is that the non-Batman parts, he knows how to work those. And the Batman stuff, he doesn't have to reinvent the bat wheel, but he does give you little bits of things to integrate Batman into that particular story's beats in a way that doesn't feel like two things duct taped together. And he's really, really good at that. And he has said, if I'm going back to my notes here, that his own assessment of his Batman work is that it's not revolutionary. And I'm not going to say he's wrong, but it is certainly, it's so solid. It does so much in a non-flashy way that it is revolutionary in the fact that we're talking about baseball. Like his batting average, I
Yeah.
feel is super, super high. And he works with all of these different artists. I'm sure being a cartoonist himself played into his knowing what he can get done on a page. And the economy of storytelling, the knowing of like, I need this beat and this beat. I need to give this little bit of information. I need to give it here. And we really see that in terms of the Manhunters backups. You have Batman in there. Batman doesn't show up until the end. Paul Kirk is technically a character that we've seen before, but not really. He only has sort of 8 pages to do these chunks in. He and Simonson just shove everything they can into there. It was eventually collected first as like a 64-page one shot, but it was originally an 8-page installment. So he's like, okay, what do we need for these 8 pages? What do we need for this 8 pages? What do we need for this 8 pages? Not to string the reader along, but to give them that sort of unfolding mystery. And that came from being a fan of mysteries, being a fan of the other genres that they are putting Batman into. I don't want to, it's going to sound like old man yelling at cloud, but superhero comics tend to be better when they are paired with a different genre. If the writer has an understanding of the other genre that they can then put the superhero into, as opposed to looking at it as a superhero story and not understanding what the underlying genre is, you know? And I feel like this era of creators had a much closer connection to the pulp stories and building blocks of the Batman character that, you know, the type of stories that built, how was it, Bob Kane? I mean, Bob Kane, but Bill Finger and the rest of the people that put Batman together, they were able to build these stories that stood on their own, and then they could put Batman into it. Whereas the further we get from the material that gave us these darker, quote unquote, versions of Batman, like the Neil Adams stuff, then people looking back at it, they're not, this is a broad statement, they're not seeing like, oh, this is Batman in a dark story. They're looking at it as like, oh, this is a dark Batman story. I need to do a dark Batman story. No, what you need to do is a dark story that has Batman in it. Yeah. Those tend to be the better ones. And it's not the fault of the younger creators or the newer creators. It's just, I tend to turn off when I see this copy of a copy type of thing. And so the stories that are able to break through that, of course, I can't think of one right at the moment, are the ones that can take an understanding of a genre and an understanding of a character and put them together in a fresh way, right? Rather than just saying like, oh, we need a dark Batman story. We'll just go and do a derivation of a dark Batman story from 20 years ago. That was really just a derivation of a dark Batman story from 15 years before that, that had some actual understanding of what those type of stories would be because they were closer to the pulp stories that they pulled from. That is a huge tangent. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no,
please,
absolutely.
Please say that. Okay, good. Oh God.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't write that out or anything.
No, I think we see, again, I'm not going to say anyone in particular, any story in particular, but I think we see people struggle all the time to, well, one thing writers love to do these days is do their take on a character, and they're going to run through as many of the rogues as they can, you know, and make it a real superhero story. And I like a lot of runs that are like that. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with them. But I do think that, like, well, here's one example. In the last decade at DC, there have been a couple of stories involving Scarecrow that were big, long arcs, right? And I'm not going to be able to name specifically what they were off the top of my head. But they felt like they were pretty close together. And it felt like, we're doing this again, you know? And reading this makes me wish that writers would find the story or the genre first and then figure out how the character fits into it versus, okay, I got to hit my Joker, I got to hit my Scarecrow, I got to hit my whatever, you know? And I don't know how they work, you know, maybe that's not fair of me to say, but I think like, yeah, I think story is king, right? And I think the best example of that in this series of comics is when Batman joins the Manhunter stuff in that last issue. Because you've read Manhunter now for, I don't remember how many installments came before that issue, 6 or 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then
no way of knowing.
Yeah, no way of knowing. There we go. Thank you.
Just do a quick count.
Someone's a listener. And then you drop Batman into it. And it does not feel like a Batman story. It feels like Batman is dropping into the Manhunter story that we have been following all along. That last issue very decidedly feels like tone-wise, structure-wise, like any of the other Manhunter issues that came before. But now it's got Batman in it. And it works so well. Batman's like a guest in somebody else's story, even though it's in his book.
Yeah.
I love that Manhunter story. And that was just like the cherry on top, because one worries that when you drop Batman into a story, okay, he's going to take over, he's going to be the lead, or he's going to hog the spotlight as Bruce often does, right? And that does not happen at all, I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder, I don't think that would have been the case if the story had been the same, but if Jim Aparo had drawn it instead of Simonson. Right? Like if the fact that you have, let's just say 6 installments, my math is horrible, of Manhunter being Simonson. But then if you take that exact same story, but you have Aparo draw it, and, you know, Aparo being established as the Batman artist from like the first 2 issues of this detective thing, then it is like, okay, this is a Batman story that the Manhunter crew show up in, but it's not. The visual stamp of that Manhunter stuff that Batman comes into, and he's trying to throw his weight around in a way, but then the Manhunter crew is like, no, you're good with Gotham, but this is a killing mission, right? This is this sort of thing. Batman's like, okay, fair enough. I understand that there's a wider thing going on, which in some ways, and I think we talked about this the last time, I love Batman to be competent, super competent. I don't necessarily love him to be perfect, right? A better Batman is a Batman that has limits. Not many, but every once in a while, it helps to see him as an incredibly capable guy in a suit, but a guy nonetheless. So yeah, the Manhunter stuff, I mean, chef's kiss. 6 Shazam awards coming out of this story. Simonson has said that before the Manhunter stuff came out, people were kind of aware of his work, but this is really the work that put him on the map, not being just one more guy doing comics. It is just a white dwarf star of a comic because there's so much in this, and yet I felt it flows easily just in terms of like a reading experience. And when it expands out to that 22 pages, or I don't even think it's 22 pages of that last installment. Again, my math is horrible. It gains space, but it doesn't lose the tension that I think is there from the earlier installments. What's your take?
Yeah, I agree. Each little installment before that is this tight little package that kind of like, well, even those have like a beginning and an end. They all end on some kind of like stinger, right? Like some kind of big moment. And then that first or the last issue, it almost feels like the extra long finale or the movie special to the series that had come before, right? Well, keeping the continuity of tone and everything. So yeah, no, it doesn't lose any of the punch. It doesn't lose any of the pacing. The only thing that's different about it really is it's broken up into a couple of set pieces, I would say. It's got a little bit more going on than any of those earlier installments, but that just makes sense because you establish Batman's reason for being there, you establish the two of them meeting up and the logical conclusion it comes to, and yeah. And not only does every little issue kind of have a beginning and end, but it's just impressive how from 8 installments or whatever it is, you get the Manhunter story from beginning to end. Also, you know, it's all there. There's no fat on it. And I guess I would say it does leave you wanting a little more because it's such a cool character, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
But it's good that it does that, right?
Yeah.
It's good that it's like, oh man, this was some fun shit. And then it only lasted 8 issues or whatever it was. So
yeah, get in, get out, leave them wanting more. Yeah, so this is, 73, 74. Simonson is doing art on this, inking himself. In terms of visually, what did you think? Because, I mean, obviously you've read Walt Simonson comics. After this, did you have to remind yourself this is Simonson? Did it feel like Simonson? Can you talk a little bit about how that came off to you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've read his whole Thor run. I'm sure I've read some of his other stuff.
Not to put you on the spot. Sorry.
No. That's totally. I think I know how I want to say this.
Okay.
I don't know that, and I'd have to go back and look at the Thor stuff again, but I don't know that stylistically I would have looked at this and said, oh, this is Simonson. I can look at this and say, this is a guy who is clearly craft-wise already farther ahead than a lot of artists at this time. Just from the way that he paces some of the paneling here. Anytime Manhunter gets into a martial arts situation, the panels do that great thing that I love when Action Comics do, which is shrink down to show you more movements in a more rapid succession. You know, that's the work of a more advanced artist than we're necessarily used to seeing. You know, he's got a flair for the dramatic when it comes to like single page spreads, right? Like a lot of these stories kick off with a single pager, or at least something that is clearly going for a bigger, more kind of epic look that has larger panels to it. I'm thinking of, there's one installment kind of in the middle. I can't remember if it's like the 4th or 5th installment, but it takes place at like a Tibetan temple or cathedral or something. And when you walk into the temple, then the panels become the archways of like if you were walking into a holy building. And I saw that and I'm just like, he's seeing all these ways to make everything look I mean, the stuff within the panels already looks interesting, you know, like Manhunter's design is wacky, you know, and these monks and archers and things like that look so cool. But then like he's finding ways to make the panels interesting and lead your eye along. And so, line work wise, I
Mhm.
I don't know if I would have picked it out as Simonson if I didn't know, but
Mhm.
it's clearly somebody who has some skill that goes beyond the era that came before, right? This is where so many artists that would kind of level up what we know them to look like or how they tell stories. This is where they made their hay, right? In the Bronze Age. This is like,
Yeah.
clearly you're looking at somebody that has advanced sensibilities and taste for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, so that was chapter 5, Cathedral Perilous. Where a couple of panels in here that take on the archway of the cathedral that Manhunter and his companion are going through in disguise. Just master class of being able to subdivide your panels to create movement and create the illusion of movement and action and just lettering. Wonderful. This is, I believe, lettered by either Ben Oda or Simonson himself. This is pre-Workman, because Workman told me, he's like, yeah, that was pre-me. Is there any other Manhunter stuff you want to talk about before we go on?
Not really. I think we covered it pretty well. Just that I really loved that story. And I would love to have that in its own collection, which I'm sure it's been collected multiple
Yes,
times.
multiple times. I think I have maybe all of them. I have the Baxter. In '98. They put out a reprint that included a quote unquote final story, which Simonson and Goodwin had been working on when Goodwin passed away. So Simonson finished it as a silent story. So that ends up being 22 pages because he needed that many pages to be able to tell this thing without dialogue, because Archie was not there to write it. He did his own sound effects, which he had done for the original thing. It's definitely worth checking out. It has also been included in every subsequent collection. I know there's a deluxe edition. I know there's a artist edition. So yeah, you have a choice of ways to interact with this material. Oh God, it's so good. It's also sort of funny how many comic tropes are, well, not comic tropes, but like things that the comics industry would embrace in the 80s and later on. Ninjas or, martial arts, clones, right?
Yes.
Big clone
Yes.
thing. Healing factor. Paul Kirk's, I can't remember if they actually call it healing factor per se, but essentially his, genetic improvement healing factor type of thing is also makes an appearance. So, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to see Simonson at a couple of different stages. This being the first, he is inking himself. This feels like soft Simonson to me. I can see things constructed in the way that he usually does, but there's more, what was the term that I used? I don't want to say filigree, but the line is softer. There's more sort of bend to it. He's doing more detailing. It feels closer to like if I'm remembering correctly, Sergio Topi, who he's a huge fan of. So he's clearly going in that direction. It looks really, really great. The next time we see him will be Detective 469, where he's inked by Al Milgrom.
Mm.
Complete 180-degree direction shift in terms of what's on the page from them. All right.
Mhm.
So we talked about like superhero stories. You had mentioned writers coming on to Batman and wanting to do their rogues gallery thing. I think the next batch of issues we're going to talk about, Detective 469 to essentially 478, mostly written by Steve Englehart, mostly drawn by Marshall Rogers, inked by Terry Austin, is like that, but it's done in a really effective way. This is the not named so at the time, but has been retroactively called the Dark Detective series. Like I said, Steve Englehart coming from Marvel, where he had quit, moving over to DC. Originally, his run was going to be drawn by Simonson and Milgrom. They were not able to stay after 2 issues. And so Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin, who had done an issue of Detective before this, were brought in to take over. This is cited as maybe one of the best Batman runs of all time, as short as it is. What is your take on it?
I can definitely see that. I don't know if I would call it that or not, but I can definitely see why someone would say that. Because again, it's kind of like how the Goodwin stuff was kind of a new start, coming out the gates, announcing yourself. This very much is too, but like you said, in kind of a back to a rogues thing, there's new rogues
Mhm.
invented. They don't overdo when they revisit. I mean, with the exception of the Joker, there are several Joker stories in this volume. I will say there's some of the best Joker stories of all time. I'll say
Mhm.
that. That is maybe the one villain that you see several times throughout this volume. The rest are kind of used still sparingly, I think, and to an effective degree. The thing that I love about this run, maybe I would call it one of the best ones I've ever read.
Mhm.
The thing I like most about it is how well it hangs together as a run. You've got your Silver St. Cloud. I'm jumping way ahead.
Yeah. No,
But
no. Go ahead.
but you've got your Rupert Thorne stuff that follows along through this whole thing. And there's a real it kind of does both things, right? Like
Mhm.
there are storylines that run through it, but then they're either like one-off issues or like a two-parter, right? Just structure-wise, it's so pleasing. And we can start by talking about the Dr. Phosphorus arc that kind of kicks the thing off. And I say arc, but it's 2 issues, right? 469 and 470. And I believe this was the first appearance of Dr. Phosphorus,
I
right?
believe so as well.
Yeah. And again, I have in my notes, and I don't know if this is BS or not, but I really felt like Dr. Phosphorus's design and concept could have been out of like a Creepy Comics or something. It fits more obviously into the superhero milieu because he becomes literally a supervillain, So it's a little
Mhm.
more that. But like his design, there's a page where or Batman first encounters him. He looks so creepy. Simonson draws him so like something out of a horror comic,
Mhm.
right? And so it does almost announce itself like, hey, we're still going to do creepy stuff, but it's maybe going to be a little bit more traditional Batman fighting supervillains slash costumed characters versus encountering the strange and dark and weird throwback kind of thing.
Mhm. Phosphorus, man, fucking great design. It inspired the Blight character of from Batman Beyond.
Hmm.
So this is where we see Simonson, inked by Milgram. There are a couple of panels where we see Batman headshot comparable to similar panel in the Manhunter stuff. So you can see it's the same artist, but Milgram the other direction in terms of the ink line that he's putting down.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
much, much bolder. And if you look at Milgram's art in general, he does tend to favor a thicker line, a bolder line, a chunkier line. Blacks are laid down in there's none of the delicacy, delicateness. I guess delicacy maybe not be the word I want to use. The delicateness that Simonson uses for the Manhunter stuff is absolutely gone. This is much more of like Batman, superhero, bolder, but still keeping atmosphere, when necessary. When Batman is originally fighting Dr. Phosphorus, scenes are lit by Dr. Phosphorus. So you've got this real light and dark thing going on. I think it's good. I don't know if I could take it for 7 or 8 issues in a row, but it's certainly dynamic to see them for these 2 issues before we then go to Marshall Rogers and Terry Austin. Rogers actually coloring these as well, at least most of them, if not all of these issues, written by Steve Englehart and lettered by John Workman. So we get Dr. Phosphorus out of the way. This is where the dark detective stuff really starts in terms of like audience perception. What's your take on Marshall Rogers?
Oh, I really like Marshall Rogers, and I think over the course of this run, he gets better and better.
Hmm.
I do think I prefer it to the Simonson stuff.
Hmm.
Honestly, I think it compares favorably to Aparo in some ways. Just, Bruce is still this muscular but lithe character. The Batman looks very much on model in that way. Does a lot of fun stuff. Definitely knows how to sell a panel that is supposed to make a big impact. So, like, the iconic one that I can remember, if I'm pulling this from the right, I believe he drew the issue where Hugo Strange puts on the cape and cowl,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. There's the sequence that kicks that issue off where you see Batman and then he pulls the
Hmm.
mask off and it's Bruce Wayne's face. And then Hugo
Hmm.
Strange pulls off the rubber mask and it's him underneath.
Yeah.
That sequence is so good. It's, man, imagine being around back then, opening
Hmm.
that comic for the first time and seeing that first page. correct me if I'm wrong, but at the end of the previous issue, there's not a hint that that is Strange's game, right? He just learns that Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Yes.
In the next issue, it jumps to, oh, I'm assuming the Batman identity, and I'm actually taking over the Wayne Foundation and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Such a leap, and that artistic, the way that that issue kicks it off as kind of like a surprise is well done.
Yeah, it's so good. These comics, I will say, I think the star is Englehart, not Rogers. Not as hot on Rogers as other people. I like a lot of this stuff. I think there are a lot of things that he does really well. I think as this run, it's only 6 issues, but as it goes on, he gets better, and you see him get better and better at things. His page designs are great. His use of setting is fantastic. His figure work needs work at times. He does so much right in other parts of what I'm looking for on a page that when a face looks a little wonky, when a body looks the proportions are just a little out of place, it just makes me just go, like a pinball machine, that I'm just like, I can't quite get there. I mean, Terry Austin does really, really great work here. They pair together super well, which is evidenced by the fact that they work together so much sort of afterwards. It's good, but fluidity doesn't have to be a absolute requirement for me, but I think the artists that I tend to like at the level that I quote unquote should be liking this, they tend to have a fluidity that I'm not feeling with Rogers. I've been thinking of how I want to express this for quite a while, and apparently I need to let this cook a little more to be able to really articulate it, because I can look at individual panels and be like, yeah, that's great. That's really, really great. And so you were talking about issue 472 is the one that starts off with the Hugo Strange, I am Batman reveal. 474 is the Deadshot reinvention, the issue that was also included in the greatest Batman stories ever told. So this may have been some of the first Marshall Rogers art that I've seen. And in looking back on it, it's probably the issue that holds up the best artistically. I have less of those moments in that issue than I have in some of the previous ones. So maybe it's like when I go back to be like, oh, maybe I should give this another shot. I start at the beginning and I hit some of those moments pulling me out of the story. Maybe I just need to read them backwards. And that'll be, But then, like, even the reintroduction of Deadshot, the design, right, that everybody sort of knows, guns on the arms, the faceless mask with the bullseye thing, like, that is a great design. That's where they're having a fight on a giant typewriter, a nice 1950s Batman sort of homage without it being super out of place. We get a little Joker hint, and then going on, just sort of flipping through these. It does get better as I go through. But yeah, I like Rogers. I wouldn't say he's my Kelly Jones, but in terms of the Bat stuff, I feel like there's always going to be a bit of a remove between me and his work. But the thing that draws me back to this particular run is the Englehart, the use of the villains, the Silver St. Cloud stuff, the giving Batman an actual love interest and not cheapening it, right? Like, this is, could she be the one? Yes. And then no.
I love that you see Alfred in the background and he's like, ooh, this might be the one, like he's such like a catty little, like, so-and-so in this,
Yeah.
I got such a kick out of that. And I think Silver St. Cloud's a great character to drop in here. Frankly, I'm surprised over the years that she hasn't been returned to more, because you return to everybody in comics. They come back,
Yeah.
But it is such a different relationship for the character, right? Like, it's never really been done like that kind of before or after, interestingly enough. So yeah, big fan of her addition into this.
Yeah. So that's 2 characters from this book already that made such a huge impact and then essentially never returned again to the betterment of their story. I wouldn't want her forgotten, but I don't know that I would. I don't know that I would want her back. And I'm kind of glad she hasn't come back because whoever brought her back would fuck it up.
Yep.
Honestly,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It'd be like Tom King being, not to shit on Tom King, but it's being like, oh well, we're gonna have him marry Catwoman, but he can't because Silver St. Cloud is back, and he was like, oh Jesus, no. Oh, so I say that. It kind of happened with, and I didn't even finish reading this, and I don't think you guys did either, the bringing back Andrea Beaumont, the Phantasm thing.
Oh.
Didn't he do like the, not Mask of the Phantasm type of thing, but their relationship has echoes of this Silver St. Cloud relationship in that they have honest love for each other, but they can't be together. She can't be with him necessarily. Although it really sort of starts there, but then it goes off into a whole Elektra thing because Andrea Beaumont is essentially Elektra for Bruce Wayne and is fantastic. I love that thing. Anyway, anything else for this particular chunk of comics?
I like the strange revelation that Rupert Thorne is being haunted by Hugo Strange, and it ends up kind of basically driving him nuts and getting him to basically confess to a bunch of stuff by the end. That's very fun. And again, it's a through line across several issues. So it builds in a satisfying way. I guess that's all I have to say about that. Although Englehart and Rogers is the laughing fish, I don't know if that's where you were going next. I mean, enough has been said about the Joker over the years. You don't need me to say it. But I do think this is maybe my ideal Joker, right? Like, this is a Joker that is funny, tells jokes, is a comedian, but will randomly kill somebody, I mean, we have done the Joker that's not really funny for way too long.
Yeah.
And seeing this Joker just like prance around and want to trademark a fish that has a smiling Joker face on it. And then, but pushes one of his henchmen in front of a moving truck, like it's, this is the guy. This is the best Joker. It doesn't look like the Mark Hamill Joker from the animated series really, but they have the same sensibility, right? They're telling jokes, but they can be really cruel at the same time, and they can just go back and forth from one to another at will. And I can hear Hamill's voice when I read this Joker in a way that I can't when I read some of the more like twisted versions. So yeah, these Joker stories, across this whole thing, really, not just the Englehart stuff, this is kind of my favorite era for the character for sure.
Yeah. Next, we've got a bunch of one-shots and things. Let me see. The Detective 482, which is the Bat-Mite 8-pager, 6-pager maybe even. Bob Rozakis, early Michael Golden art. A fun little story. Bat-Mite shows up at DC and is like, hey, you haven't put me in a comic in a while. This was also included in the Batman Greatest Stories Ever Told, which is how I knew about it.
It's just fun. There's not much to it. But I love that even though this Bat era is definitely removed from kind of the silly Batman and Robin, where like in the last panel, Robin cracks a joke and Batman laughs or whatever, they're chuckling to one another. There's still room for silliness in this era, even if it's not making it into the regular stories as much.
Yeah. So then next we have Batman 321, which is another Joker story written by Len Wein, another Walt Simonson issue, drawn by Simonson and inked by Dick Giordano. Haha, made it through that one. And of course it has a Jose Luis Garcia Lopez cover on it, so it'd be included for that. I was going to ask about Garcia Lopez's Joker, but I will do that in a little bit. This would include, if for no other reason, another Simonson comparison here, inked by Dick Giordano. He just has a thinner line to his work anyway, which you will see in other places in this book. So he'll bring that less bombastic veneer. So I feel like Simonson is not overpowered here. And then after that, we have, did I give a number for this? DC Special Series, I think 15?
It is 15, yeah.
50? Okay, cool. They did not put the actual issue number on the redone cover. Thank you very much for that. I Now Pronounce You Batman and Wife.
Yeah.
It's a great title. Written by Denny O'Neil, another Michael Golden issue. A really golden, much curvier. I think that tends to be, well, I shouldn't say a blanket statement like this, but artists tend to start out maybe a little curvier and then they kind of tighten up as their style progresses. This is a Ra's al Ghul, Talia al Ghul story. What's your take on this?
Yeah, he's once again trying to get Batman to bone his daughter, very aggressively.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a fun return to. I don't think it's as how do I say this? I think the Denny O'Neil whole arc
Mm-hmm.
is better than just this one issue,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is kind of this just being like kind of a standalone story in a DC special series kind of makes it seem a little bit lighter than probably the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's kind of treated like a goof a little bit. Like
Yeah.
him just it's kind of a crazier caper on Ra's part than we're used to seeing, but
Yeah.
but I don't know. I certainly enjoyed it. It was
Yeah.
fun.
I think I included it more for the golden art than carrying through this Ra's al Ghul plotline. It also happened to be in the same issue as the next thing we're going to talk about, so I was like, sure, why not?
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and throw that in there. Because next is Death Strikes at Midnight and 3, a prose story written by Denny O'Neil with illustrations by Marshall Rogers. This was also included in the Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told. Blew my fucking mind when I read this. Because I'm like reading comics and comics and comics, and I'm like, oh, it's prose. Okay, let me look. And whatever I said about Marshall Rogers before this, he kills in this story. Oh, so the chef kissing here, kissing the chef's kiss everywhere for this whole thing. Why don't you talk about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, so it's prose that's kind of surrounded by imagery or broken up by imagery, but it's not really sequential almost at all. And I just think every sort of singular image just strikes the right tone. It's so moody and so cool and just really impressive. Like it's much more impressive than the sequential art that Rogers was doing around this time, I think. And
it is, not to get you off, but I'm flipping through this here. There are sequential parts to it.
Yeah.
Right? So Denny's text is describing a scene, and then maybe 2 or 3 pages into the story, you've got 3 tiers of art with like 2 large tiers of text in between it. But like the top tier of the art and the bottom tier of the art, each of those is broken up into panels or whatever. So you've got like maybe 16 panels worth of action on this page with Denny O'Neil's texts filling in what is going on between the action panels. So
yeah,
it's not a comic, but it gives you hints of the comic, but it doesn't have like word balloon dialogue, but you get dialogue with it. You don't have to worry about page construction, but you get Rogers breaking down of the action into sequential images. It's good.
Yeah. And just so moody, like the scene of Bruce kind of in shadow in the cowl, and then the next panel is some of extreme close up on some guns, and then the next panel is you've got like Bruce's in silhouette, and then in the foreground there's the silhouettes of the gunmen, and it's so wildly good.
Yeah. It's like when I read it, I wouldn't say I'm building the page in my head because they're giving me the page and they're giving me the art. It's not like I'm just reading prose where I'm imagining what Marshall Rogers would do with this.
Yeah.
But it's also not giving me Marshall Rogers doing this. So it's giving me all the good, and I can assemble it to be the best version of what this could be, you know? And I don't recommend anybody else, like, you know, these guys are professionals. Like, I don't really recommend other folks necessarily try and do this because they've done this a couple of times. Like, there's obviously the Morrison issue that was essentially prose and art by, I think, John Van Fleet, who I like, but I don't think it was nearly as effective as this.
I'm a notorious prose and comics hater.
Yeah.
Like, honestly. But this is kind of the best version of what, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you know, I can't deny that this is kind of the best version of that.
Yeah, it's so good, but like, you know, it's going to inspire people to try and do it, and they're not going to be able to do it as well. So you're like, God damn it, this thing is so good. We're going to have to suffer through so much substandard crap, people trying to get to this level that they're not going to be able to do. Just admire it, leave it, and just move on and do something else because, man, chef's kiss on this thing. Yeah. All right. Okay, so next we've got DC Superstars 17, and then a bunch of Adventure Comics issues. This is the introduction of Huntress and the death of Earth 2 Batman and some Justice Society stuff.
I'm really fascinated about this time in comics. This is like, I don't think at this point Crisis is even like a nugget of an idea, because this is like what, 1980, something like that.
It is 1977.
Okay,
Yeah.
Crisis is definitely not on the table yet.
Nope.
I'm fascinated in this kind of limbo world where they were trying to figure out how to make the Justice Society and Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman make sense, And so then you get weird things like, well, on this Earth, they started at this time, and then on this Earth, they actually started 25 years later, because that's kind of when they decided that's how the Golden Age would make sense with the Silver Age or whatever, I'm just so fascinated by this era, and I think it's a lot of fun too. Like, it's fun to watch them try to navigate that stuff in real time and not shy away from it. Make no bones about saying, like, yeah, there's actually two Batman and there's actually two Superman, And I think it gave a real opportunity. And of course, down the road, this would kind of screw up the storytelling a little bit because all of a sudden Huntress doesn't make any sense in future continuities. But I think, like, here, Bruce and Selina retiring, and then Selina having to go do one last job to get herself out of a jam, and then dying during that job, and then Bruce again giving up the cowl because of the tragedy or whatever, and then their daughter wanting to take that up, and it's so classic, soapy, tropey legacy storytelling, and it just works. And I'm a big fan of, is it Joe Staton or is it Joe Staton?
Let's say Staton.
Okay. Yeah.
I shouldn't say there's no way of knowing. I mean, I could have done a little research, but let's just go ahead and say Staton.
I've always said Staton, but I thought maybe you would know definitively. But
nope.
I'm a big fan of his art too. Just again, like, the gold standard for, like, quote unquote, the way that DC Comics should look has always been Jose Luis Garcia Lopez.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah, but Joe Staton, like, from the next set down the line, all of his DC characters look like how they should to me. The Power Girl generation, I just think of the way that he draws Power Girl, the way he draws Huntress. That generation of characters just looks right in Joe Staton's hands, and kind of defines that corner of DC Comics for me.
Yeah. Staton is a guy, I feel like he's underrated in a way that Jerry Ordway is as well. I forgot to double check this, but I'm assuming this is like earlier in Staton's career. So he is tagged with being kind of like the earlier Jerry Ordway, where Jerry Ordway was like, oh, he's the Earth 2 artist, right? Staton and Levitz doing the Adventure Comics stuff that begins around when we pick it up here. Staton was the current artist drawing these Golden Age characters and really did a good job of it. His work here is decent, but I think you'll agree he gets much better, certainly by the time of the Green Lantern stuff, right? And then from there on, every time I've come back and seen some of Staton's work, it's always impressed me, even into, his later stuff, just in terms of what he's bringing to a page in terms of, like, textuality. God, if that's even a freaking word. The stuff here is good. It's, I guess, cromulent, however you want to, whatever term we want to use for that. It gets the story told, and it's used here for that storytelling. But certainly even a couple of years after this, in the third volume, he draws, and he's inked by George Freeman. And that issue, oh man, when we talk about that, that's... spoiler alert, it's going to be great. There are a couple of panels that he references specifically in that issue that we see here, like Batman holding the dead Catwoman on page 8 of this Huntress story. He refers back to himself in that later issue. He refers back to here. But yeah, Staton's good, really good. Levitz, dealing with the JSA characters. So I wanted to include this for it's the death of the Golden Age Batman, but also, like you were talking about, that second generation, the Huntress and the grown-up Dick Grayson, like them trying to figure out what their place is in this world that has Batman and that doesn't have Batman. It deals with legacy, avoiding legacy, going into legacy. And these are questions that these characters who show up very briefly in the next couple of years, they get their own Brave and the Bold issue where they team up with the Earth One Batman. And it ties off a lot of the questions and stuff and the things that they're dealing with here in these couple of issues. Something else that I liked was yes, this is the death of Earth 2 Batman, but it's Bruce Wayne who had retired and became Commissioner Wayne. And he puts the suit back on and then he dies, but it's kind of anticlimactic, which I like.
He's just some guy, it's like who got powers somehow, but like, it's not a rogue that has ever existed before. It was just some guy that was mad at Bruce
and met up with some wizard who gave him power to do this. And, narratively, I don't know how much that works, but I kind of like it. Then the last issue, the 463, is the JSA getting together and trying to track down the wizard who gave this guy the powers. And I don't know if I would include this last issue in a collection. It does sort of tie off some of those things that get picked up later on a little better, but it's probably the most perfunctory, if I'm using that word correctly, issue in this entire collection. Mm-hmm. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, but I get why it's there.
Yeah. Okay, so from that, we are now on Untold Legend of Batman, written by Len Wein, 3-issue mini, 2/3 of which by Jim Aparo. The first issue, inked by Jim Aparo, drawn by John fucking Byrne. This is 1980. Around this time, the newsstands would have had X-Men 135, probably sitting right next to this. So, I mean, Byrne was an absolute workhorse being able to turn stuff out. I can't necessarily find how I can figure out how he was able to do this in between his X-Men stuff, but I don't know exactly like how he got the assignment, because he didn't leave Marvel until 85. And this is really his first DC work, although obviously he's a fan of the characters. So that's a little more of a mystery than I would like to be able to say that. So but
here's a question about that. This kind of feels like a series that could take place at any time. Mm-hmm. They even call it Untold Legend of the Batman, I assume for a reason. So like, one wonders whether this partially had been sitting in a drawer for a little bit. Because, like, kind of the purpose of this is to actually retell Batman's origin in part, but, like, synthesize all the elements that make Batman Batman, including, like, B characters and C characters and rogues, kind of all into one little recap almost, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So one wonders whether, like, Byrne was given the project early on and then was like, hey, I'm not going to finish it because I got Marvel stuff
Mutants.
Cooking, or yeah, whatever. I don't, something like that. I could see it having started earlier than it was released by a significant degree.
Yeah, I'll have to do more research on that because it's curious. So hopefully for volume 3, I'll be able to go back to this. But in terms of synthesizing the Bat history up to this point, this was not included in the greatest Batman stories ever told. However, the stories with like Lou Moxon and his dad getting the Batman costume at like a Halloween thing, and like a lot of those elements that Wein mentions in this first issue are actually reprinted in there. So I have read them. So reading them here and being like, oh, so that's how they've now included this and this other thing. And yeah, seeing Byrne do this, Aparo is a really good inker for Byrne. These pages look great, but then issue 2 and 3, it's the Jim Aparo hour, and I don't want to say like then it really is Batman, but the Byrne Batman looks really good. But then it's like, all right, experiment over. Jim is taking us home. I do want to say a friend of the show, Paul Lai, did a really good episode looking at this 3-issue series for his comic syllabus podcast, I believe episode 17. So do yourself a favor to go and check that out. It's a really good listen. And he goes into this material from typically Paul, a couple of different directions, and much more depth than we are going to be able to do that in this setting. But did this miniseries do what it was supposed to do for you?
Oh yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was great to look at,
Hmm.
but I got a kick out of some of this stuff. I didn't, and you can tell me maybe it was established right here, but
Hmm.
some of this stuff I didn't realize had been established this early on, like Alfred's history in the service and him wanting to be an actor, but then joining the service. Like, I didn't realize that that was in place this early,
Sure.
right? Like,
Yeah.
is that something they invented for this? Or, I've read all the old Detective Comics stuff. I don't remember that coming up. I could be wrong, but
Mm. I think Ween didn't make that leap here. He took an offhanded comment and built it into this,
yeah.
which is an important skill in and of itself to wade through all of this material and say, okay, this is important. Let's emphasize this and de-emphasize that. This is printed in 1980. So, usually you would see reprints just being reprinted things in an ongoing series, right? Like an issue of an ongoing series would be a reprint of an earlier, issue, or it would be a backup in that you didn't necessarily see a lot of focused reprints as their own thing. So this certainly gives a lot of this Bat milieu a spotlight to be like a reinstatement of purpose, I guess. Or like, okay, here's what Batman is. His past was before he became Batman, he was Robin for a little bit because sure, why not?
Yeah, that was fun too.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that's a thing that they used to do in the Golden Age all the time, where they would have like, well, actually, Jor-El was the first Superman, really.
Hmm.
And then like,
Yeah.
so again, I wonder, I can't remember, what was that, like one of those imaginary stories from the olden
Yeah.
days of comics that then they decided to incorporate into. Wouldn't
Yeah.
surprise me.
Would not surprise me. It certainly wasn't reprinted in the greatest Batman stories ever told, which is apparently the ur-text of my entire Bat understanding. But yeah, it is a good Batman stuff. Again, it's more Jim Aparo, and it's an interesting look at DC doing this type of continuity management in an era where everything isn't at everybody's fingertips all the time. Like I said, originally published in 80, it wasn't collected until certainly, this came out and then Crisis a couple of years later made this obsolete. So then there was probably no reason for them to collect it. It has been obviously collected since. Okay, home stretch here. Detective Comics 500. I think we skipped over something. I did skip over something. One of the earlier detective issues, 457, there's no fear in crime.
No hope in Crime Alley.
No hope in Crime Alley. I'm just trying to scroll through my notes to get to that. Denny O'Neil, Dick Giordano introduces Leslie Tompkins.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Oh, just one of my favorite characters in all of the Bat mythos, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great introduction for her. I think it's a little Forrest Gumpy in that she happened to be nearby the original murder of Bruce's parents.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit, kismet in that way. But I mean, it's so sweet. And she will go on to be an insanely important character in the history of Batman. And I think like one of the better first issues for a character of this nature, just tying her to Bruce's origin, almost like an angel or like a mother, obviously a mother figure going into the future. And just the fact that Crime Alley and Gotham City as a whole, in hundreds of issues of Batman comics up to this point, is no hope, no hope, no hope. It's right there in the title, right? And for Bruce to conclude by the end that perhaps Leslie Tompkins is the hope that exists in Crime Alley because she lives there and refuses to leave because she believes she can make a difference or whatever. That is a hell of a sentiment added to mythos here, and plus it just looks great. Like,
Yeah.
It's Dick Giordano art all the way through, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it ends with Batman smiling.
Yes.
Adorable.
Yep.
It's very sweet. Interesting that later on she would be connected with being a doctor. and having a clinic like in Crime Alley. It's not just that she's there as a hope. It sort of institutionalizes it a little more. But here, the medical part of it isn't there, but it doesn't make this any less powerful as the ray of hope in this hopeless place that created Batman. So 12 pages, O'Neill, Giordano. We'll just bang this out because that's how we do. Trying to math this out. 43 issues later, Detective Comics 500. This has a 2-page Walt Simonson silent story written by Len Wein entitled Once Upon a Time. The captions are, "It was a dark and stormy night. Suddenly a shot rang out. The maid screamed. A door slammed. Suddenly a pirate ship appeared on the horizon. As he touched her hand, she sighed, and they lived happily ever after." So basically, all of these cliche lines, Len Wein is like, all right, Walt, do your thing. And Walt, fucking 2 pages, goes in and God, it's so good. This is him inking himself again, let's say at least 6 years after his Manhunter stuff. Yeah. And his style is much more angular.
Yes.
Much more confident. The curves are kind of gone. Things are much blockier, I almost said improved. It's just different, but it is one of the side effects of having these comics in this book. You could literally just flip from one page to another and see the evolution of an artist in such a relatively short time to go from point A to point Z, where there are so many touchstones that remain the same, but variation between them. I don't think they had anything like that in the greatest Batman stories ever told, as I just said something derogatory about this book that I love so much. But in terms of this projected collection serving multiple masters, using it as a primer to be able to teach somebody how comics work, or one of the things that spending more time with comics and studying them more and being more open to what it is that they're giving you, it can give you the richness of being able to see creators evolve in their craft and get better and be able to give you different things that work in different ways. And it's not just like, oh, somebody drew Batman. Somebody did draw Batman. Somebody drew Batman very well. Drawing Batman very well does not mean you can only get a Neil Adams. It doesn't mean you can only get a Jim Aparo. It doesn't mean you can only get a Walt Simonson. You can get other things that I didn't even mention. Like, there's so much variation. And one of the things that keeps me re-engaging with comics is finding those variations. There's always stuff to learn. There's new stuff to learn. There's old stuff to discover. And if you see 2 images of Batman and they're drawn by different artists, you're like, those are supposed to be the same thing. I like one better than the other. Why do I like that one better than this one over here? Is there maybe a third one I'm going to love even better than that? That's maybe the question that's been driving me for 40-some years for this type of thing. When I was putting this thing together, I saw that arc take shape, and I'm like, okay, well then maybe I will include this middle issue, because it is another point in making that case. And I love Walt Simonson, so if it's going to be Walt Simonson to help me make that case, then so much the better. Yeah. Also, because I didn't have that many Jose Luis Garcia Lopez different variations to be able to use, but the Simonson stuff was right there. But DC Comics 500 I included also because it has To Kill a Legend, written by Alan Brennert, drawn by Dick Giordano. That man gets around. Alan Brennert is a name that is definitely going to come up next volume. I can think of at least 3 comics that he's got in there. He hasn't written a whole bunch of DC stuff, primarily an animation writer or a writer outside of comics, but maybe pound for pound, one of my favorite comic book writers, kind of like the John Cazale of comic book writers, because he only did like 6 movies, unfortunately, because he passed away, but his 6 movies were like Dog Day Afternoon, Godfather, Godfather 2, The Conversation, right? So pound for pound, every movie that dude was in, the Kiss of the Chef, he's only written like 6 or 7 things. He earned his own Batman Tales of the Dark Knight, whatever, collection. This story was also reprinted in the Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah. Again, it's in my DNA. So I've read this before. You read it for this. What did you think about it?
It was wacky.
Mm-hmm.
Like, You're talking about getting the Phantom Stranger in there. You're talking
Mm-hmm.
about a Earth. I can't remember what parallel Earth they ended up naming this. I can't remember what it
Oh,
was. But they put a number on it because, of course, they put a
of
number
course I
on
did.
they put a number on every Earth at some point. But it's such a wacky kind of time loop thing to try to prevent the murder of Batman's parents, and it's very like I was just struck by how wacky it was. I really liked it for sure. And you're telling me it was in the Batman's Greatest Stories Ever Told. As good as it is, it doesn't surprise me that it's not something I've seen collected a bunch as a
Mm-hmm.
classic Batman story, because it is kind of like high difficulty level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to read a lot of Batman before you appreciate this a little more, because now you're talking about alternate Earths and Phantom Stranger, and it wouldn't be on the short list if you were starting out. You know what I mean? I
No,
guess that's what I'm saying.
no. It
Um,
gives you enough context to roll with that stuff. I think in terms of Brennert's work and his bat work, there always seems to be something else going on, either some theme, some humanization of Batman, of the characters. Like I feel like it's certainly there in terms of anniversary issues, right? This is Detective 500. This
mhm.
does feel like it's that type of story that Batman was created because his parents were killed. And so Phantom Stranger is like, you've been denied this so long. It looks like on this other Earth that thing's coming up again. I'm going to give you the chance to go fix that. It's constructed in kind of a bit of like a city on the edge of forever kind of vibe to it, in terms of like Batman trying to do a thing, Robin being, maybe this is not the thing we should be doing,
Yeah.
right? Edith Keeler, maybe she has to die, maybe not. I can't believe Bruce's parents have to die. This is an Earth that doesn't have any heroes, not just like superheroes, like there's no Gilgamesh, there's no Robin Hood, right? Brennert puts a bunch of elements into this that I liked and that I think work in terms of making this an effective story. And it's, Dick Giordanoing Batman all over the place. Last but not least, we have Jose Luis Garcia Lopez
Ah,
and Lin Wein. We have Batman, we have the Hulk. We end another one of these books with a Marvel DC team up. So my question that I was going to ask before that I saved until now, the Joker's face, should he look like a regular human being or not? Close your
oh
eyes, think
boy.
of a Joker. Is that chin dishumanly figured?
I, I feel like I'm gonna contradict myself from what I said
That's
about
fine.
Batman's ears.
You know, you you
Um,
uh you contain multitudes, right? You can contradict yourself. It's fine.
I love his Joker.
Yeah.
I love the big grin, The bigger the grin, the better,
Yeah.
I say with the Joker. I just think everything he draws, it looks so right?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at it again
Yeah.
here, and this is
Yeah.
the Joker from like The Killing Joke, eventually.
It's the chin, right? Like his face is so elongated.
Do you not care for it, or?
Oh no, I love it. I mean, obviously he sells it. Occasionally I'll catch it for a second and I'll just be like, how is that actually possible? But I'm like, I don't care because it's so balanced, right?
Yeah, yes.
And so this is Batman, or the Joker wants like a gamma gun. So he steals one from a laboratory that Bruce Banner is working at, which is owned by Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne essentially teams up with Bruce Banner and the Hulk to stop the Joker from using this gamma gun to use on the Shaper of Worlds, who is able to shape reality and
What a
stuff.
pull for that character too.
Yeah. But we get to see Joker rewriting reality. We get to see Clown Batman. One of my favorite panels is the Joker biting his bottom lip.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, right. You know the one I'm talking about. He's
Oh,
like,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
he's, oh my God. Oh, it's so good. Yeah,
Actually,
page 25.
Brian would say that that's a nut face.
Well, yeah, I think the term we're looking for is suggestive, but oh God, it looks so good. So in some of the earlier crossovers, I think we saw not only Spider-Man and Superman, but also like the Hulk and Wonder Woman, and there were some other Marvel cameos. I really wish there had been more Marvel cameos in this one, simply because we would have seen Garcia Lopez's take on Marvel characters, which we really never get to see. That aside, his Hulk looks so good. And like when the Joker basically gets control of reality and he's just making things go like super crazy, it all still works. And Garcia Lopez basically drops out panel borders and he has things overlapping each other. So it's super crowded, but it's still super clean. And you can see it. Oh, man, this is so good. Now, I love me some Claremont X-Men. I love X-Men Teen Titans. You know, it's got Walt Simonson in it. Like, what's not to love? I love that as one of the epitomes of successful comic booking for me. Superman, oh, that's not really a crossover. The Superman Muhammad Ali, which we've talked about before, Neil Adams, that is in some ways one of the best comic books ever made. This is not quite up to those standards, but man, is it just a feast. And I didn't feel like I could have this look at Bronze Age Batman stuff without putting it in there.
Oh, for sure. And especially once you get to those last 8 pages or however many it is, where the Joker is getting his dream world or whatever.
Yeah.
This comic was great all the way through. And this is the wackiest of them all. And it's the best thing about it, besides the wonderful art and the bonkers story and just goes all over the place, is that it was completely surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as much as I liked the Spider-Man crossover issues that we've covered in this show, Superman and Spider-Man, as much as I liked those, they were more or less boilerplate Spider-Man, Superman stuff. I had no idea where this comic was going at almost any moment, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So for the last few pages.
Yeah.
And I was not expecting the artistic feast here. Like, oh man, you get like a Picasso at one point. It's, I don't even know how to talk about it without blathering, but
I mean, Dali-esque.
Yeah.
And then more Dali, and then just sort of doubling down on that again and again. It starts off pretty tight panel work, right? Earlier on in the issue, some panel borders are taken out. The page design is relatively straightforward. But then that last 10 pages or 12 pages, they're essentially splash pages. Panels are kind of suggested in a way that only professionals can get away with and have it not turn into a complete mess. Garcia Lopez is the professional when it comes to things like this. He has that command of figure. He has that command of being able to keep things. He has that fluidity that unfairly Marshall Rogers didn't have, and I don't think ever really got to. Garcia Lopez, any direction, any angle, any whatever, man, he sells it. And everything is not real, but it's real enough that you can believe it, even if it's an unbelievable thing. The other thing I'm thinking of is, of course, the Emperor Joker arc from, 2000, whatever, Superman. What would happen if the Joker got control of reality and it was 5 issues of, vaguely remember it being, not bad. It wasn't this thing. And just the fact they win because, Batman, I mean, he punches the Joker to win, but he's able to distract the Joker by just making him go crazier and crazier. And so he wins because there's a limit to the Joker's craziness when given like an infinite canvas, right? Keep turning everything up to 11 and 12 and 13, and eventually even the Joker is going to crack, but not Batman. And so when the Joker is like, no mas, and Batman says, pow, and so, oh god damn, it's so good. And then basically they're like, okay, it's over. The Shaper of Worlds leaves. Joker is in prison. Batman is looking out at Bruce Wayne as he's walking away. I swear you can hear the Lonely Man theme playing. And Garcia Lopez does the neat little trick of Bruce Banner's. God, I hope I said Bruce Banner and not Bruce Wayne. Anyway.
You said Bruce Wayne, but that's all right.
Oh, I meant Bruce Wayne? Okay.
We all knew.
Yeah. I mean, how often do you have 2 Bruces in the same comic? Not very often. And that's kind of the point here. But anyway, Bruce Banner is walking away with his shadow, of course, the Hulk, right? And it's Garcia Lopez, little touches, big flourishes, sweeping page, splash page vistas, down to the way Commissioner Gordon is holding a pipe in his hand, the way his fingers are curling around the pipe as he's walking with Batman away from the Joker's cell. Like, there's so much to fixate on here. God, it's so good. So, so good. Okay, taking a fork, sticking it in that. So to recap, these issues feel like a good collection, a good cross-section of Bat stories at this particular time.
Yeah, and quite a large feast.
So just to quickly recap, DC 3-cast, what are you guys doing right at the moment?
Oh, what are we doing? We kind of jacked up our format a lot to try to keep all of us at least somewhat happy.
Yeah. Speaking of anniversary, whatever, congratulations on your 500th episode.
Yeah, that came and went, and we didn't even
we
didn't even mention it.
Yeah.
But thank you. That's I can't believe how long we've been doing it. So what are we doing right now? Well, okay, basically our format is once a month we do a previews show. So whenever the DC previews come out, we pour over those and pick out like 8 to 10 things that we're interested in from those. But to be honest, like current comics, we got into a cycle of negativity about current comics, not because DC's not putting out a bunch of good comics at any given time, right? Any publisher will be putting out a handful of good comics at any given time, right? Even in the New 52, there were good comics. But it's just that we were kind of tired of the churn of getting excited for the overall direction of the line and then not being excited about it and then getting our hopes up again and then not being excited about it. So what we do instead is once a month, we do the previews thing, and we also do a week where we visit some book that's going on in the current DC publishing landscape. Something that we think we're going to enjoy, although it doesn't always bear out that way, but we're trying to approach it in a more positive way, even if it's less comprehensive, right? And then the rest of the time, we're doing a post-crisis read-through. We're not going to promise that we're going to read every single comic, but we're going to hit like the major highlights. So like Batman Year One coming out of Crisis. And we're about to start the Byrne Superman stuff. And then at a certain point, I'm sure we will do the Wonder Woman relaunch, right? But we also read the first 2 issues of Blue Beetle and Booster Gold that started kind of around the same time, right? So we're trying to hit the highlights. We're going to sample most of everything. And then there's some stuff where it's like, well, we don't need to read any more of that, you know?
Yeah.
But we'd like to be pretty comprehensive about at least touching on everything that goes on after Crisis. And I think the reason why we started doing this was just because at a certain point we were like, you know, there's all these old comics that we never make time to read. And the new stuff is only jazzing us so much. And I think the 3 of us wanted some kind of balance between everything and making time for some of the older stuff, but also keeping a toe dipped in with the new stuff. That's what we try to do. And then there's our Patreon, and our Patreon right now is just wrapping up Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, which was a detour that we took from Morrison. We've been covering all of Grant Morrison's work at DC, and we take these little breaks to keep Brian from going insane. And so we're just finishing up Moore's Swamp Thing. I can't remember what our next intermezzo is going to be, but we're going to return to Morrison. Where are we with Morrison right now? We're getting close to All-Star, Superman, Seven Soldiers era Morrison, I think.
Okay.
So it's a lot, but that's what we're doing, and we're just trying to make it work in this crazy world. So
yeah. I think the lads give you a little too much shit about the cry. I mean, I'm not saying that. I'm not just saying that because you happen to be here as a guest, but you are the orchestrator of the Crisis read through, right? Like you're the one that they've tasked to pick out like a reading list.
Yeah, but there's a lot of behind the scenes machinations, you know. I get screwed over and No, not really. No, but I will say I give it back to them in kind, but I pick my spots so you don't hear it as often on the show, but you know.
You don't get to 500 episodes without figuring out how to deal with people and how to I just like deal with people.
Oh,
But
no,
how to make something work, right?
Yeah.
And I've certainly been inspired, even if sort of retroactively, at the way you guys can keep doing that for so long and sort of having a mandate and being like, well, it's kind of working, but in order for us to be happier, we need to do this and we need to do that. And that type of self-awareness is certainly a lesson that is not lost on me. And it certainly has kept your show, either the Patreon version or the free version, certainly worth listening to. 500 episodes in and more to come.
Well, thank you for saying
There you
that. That's very, and you were doing it first, so you've been doing it a lot longer than we have, so that's very impressive. And the one thing I will say is that, like, we do recognize that if we change the format, which we've done a few times over the years, some people might be upset by that or prefer our show to be one way or another, but we wouldn't still be doing the show if we didn't tweak the format every once in a while, we just wouldn't. So it's
yeah. And I mean, like, the format, it's not even really a format tweak. It's like just the emphasis changes, but you guys, the three of you, have been remarkably consistent over 500 episodes. So, like, if you like an episode of the show, you're really going to like any episode of the show. Now, maybe some of them more than others just because of the content that you're talking about, but I mean, that's going to happen anytime. But your show is your show, 500 episodes in and counting. Mm-hmm. Just the consistency of that, like the Patreon stuff. I mean, all the episodes are good, but like the Patreon, I told this to, Brian when he was on, but like the Morrison stuff, the Starman stuff, the Animal Man stuff, your guys' examination of Animal Man, I thought was like really, really good. And then you went on to do Starman, and the fact that you all loved it as equally as Brian in your own ways, but also like a shared thing. That was really great, because I was like, if you didn't like Starman, I don't know, man. I might have to just be like, we'll just get somebody else to come in. No.
Yeah.
No. But like, it would have made me question some things. I'd have been like, oh wow, that's really interesting. I mean, the Kelly Jones stuff, I can let that go. But the Starman, I was like, no, man, that seems like it'd be. But the three of you all being simpatico on that. But then when you guys go your own directions, as you should, it's really, really good. It's a staple in my podcast rotation, and it should be a staple in anybody's. Even if you're not necessarily, I mean, if you're a DC fan, like, that helps. But I got a chance to see Weird Al. And my girlfriend and I, it's about an hour drive from here to where we saw him in Virginia. And we put on your Q&A episode that had your top 10 Weird Al songs to do, because I didn't want to necessarily listen to Weird Al before I went there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I wanted something to sort of get in the mood. And I put it on, and, I laughed and nodded, and she laughed and nodded. And so, show up for the DC Comics, stay for just the good podcasting. So,
oh, thank you. That's way too kind, but you are too kind anyway. So,
okay, so that is it for this. We will be back with Volume 3. Hopefully not a year plus after this. We will check our schedules and stuff, but we will certainly have you back sooner rather than later, because, man, we've got some good comics in Volume 3 waiting for you to talk about. So that, as they say, is that. Again, if you liked what you heard and want to hear more, we've got literally hundreds of episodes over at robotsfromtomorrow.net. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your enemies if you want to keep them guessing about your surprise gift of exquisite comics podcasting. You can get the word out about your enjoyment in the comments or the emails or the skeets or the tubes or whatever method you have available to you. You can do that while you're liking, subscribing, rating, and reviewing the show. Because, of course, that helps more people find out about episodes like this and the other stuff we have going on in our little slice of the multiverse, and it would warm our little robot hearts ever so much if you would be so kind as to do so. In 2 weeks, on February 5th, we finally bring you the already teased and mentioned look at the first 4 issues of Classic X-Men and how writer Chris Claremont got a second chance to make a first impression for his legendary run on Marvel's Mutants. After that, we have a few creator chats lined up, including one with director Wes Easton about his LCS documentary Shopping for Superman, one with cartoonist and longtime friend of the show Jim Rugg, and circling back to the Avery Hill side of the pond, cartoonist Kit Anderson about her 2025 book, Second Shift. Oh, and just FYI, Vince and I already have our next recording session scheduled, so there's that little bit of good news as well. We hope you come back for those and many more episodes. So, until then, my name is Greg. Please, stay safe, keep enjoying those funny books, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Systems disengaged.